My name is Emily Carter. At 2 a.m., my husband's boss said he's mine, but my calm revenge ended her legacy. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to tell a story like this. For most of my life, I was ordinary, the kind of woman people forgot at dinner parties but remembered when they needed someone reliable. I liked things that made sense. Morning coffee at 7:15, my husband's shirts ironed by color, and a quiet apartment that smelled faintly of lavender and fresh paper. My husband, Daniel, worked for an architectural firm in Chicago, one of those glass box offices that looked expensive even when they weren't. He was always talking about his boss, Claudia Mercer, a name that sounded like it came with a signature perfume. She was older, confident, and the kind of woman who made rooms go silent when she entered. I used to admire her from afar, or maybe envy her just a little. Daniel would tell me stories about her brilliance. Claudia doesn't sleep, he'd laugh. She's a machine. She expects the same from everyone. I'd nod, pretending I wasn't bothered by how often her name filled our home. I told myself that's how ambition worked. You borrow the light from people who already shine. But back then, Daniel still held my hand when we crossed the street. He'd leave sticky notes on the fridge dinner Friday. Just us. Sometimes, he'd hum in the shower, and the sound would fill the apartment like we were the only two people in the world. Then came the late nights. At first, they were harmless. A few extra hours at the firm, client meetings running long, and urgent presentation. I'd stay up, watching the city through the window, the way its lights flickered like restless stars. I'd text him, "Everything okay?" He'd reply, "Just wrapping up." "Don't wait up," I told myself it was fine. Marriage is compromise. Ambition takes time. But something quiet started to shift, like the temperature of the room dropped, even when the heater was on. The first real sign came one Thursday night. He came home smelling faintly of perfume. Not mine, not anything I'd ever worn. It wasn't cheap either, it had that sharp, powdery finish of something luxurious, something confident. I asked him about it, he laughed. "You're imagining things, Em." Claudia hugged everyone after the pitch. "You know how she is." I didn't. But I smiled anyway, the kind of smile women give when they don't want to seem jealous, even though something deep inside them has already cracked. That night, when he fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling for hours. The shadows from the streetlight outside cut across our bedroom wall, sharp and cold. I counted every second between his breaths. Still, I told myself, don't become paranoid. Don't ruin what's fine. 2 weeks later, he forgot our anniversary. He didn't even pretend to remember. Just a text at 10:30 p.m. "Running late, don't wait up." So I sat at our dining table alone, candles half melted. A cake I'd baked cooling untouched. I looked at our wedding photo on the shelf. The one where he was kissing my forehead, and I looked like I actually believed love was forever. That night, I didn't cry. I just blew out the candles and whispered to myself, "This is how people disappear." I tried. I brought him lunch to work once. A small surprise. But when I walked into the firm's glass lobby, the receptionist hesitated. "Oh, Mr. Carter's in a meeting," she said. "With Ms. Mercer." "Of course." I left the lunch on his desk, and walked out before anyone could see the disappointment on my face. But as I passed by the conference room, I saw something through the frosted glass. Her silhouette, tall, poised, standing too close to his. Their heads bent toward each other. Something inside me shifted then. A quiet, dangerous kind of stillness. The kind you feel before a storm. I didn't confront him that night. I waited, I watched. I learned how to listen differently. Not to what he said, but what he didn't. The next few weeks were a blur of missed calls, last-minute trips, and vague explanations. I played my part, the understanding wife. But every time he smiled at his phone, I saw the reflection of a woman who was starting to lose herself. Then, one night, 2 a.m., the phone rang. It wasn't Daniel's, it was mine. The number was unfamiliar. I answered, half asleep. A woman's voice, smooth and deliberate, filled the line. "He's mine." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Who is this?" I whispered. She laughed softly. "You know who this is. Don't embarrass yourself." And then the line went dead. I sat there, in the dark, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the apartment. My hands were trembling, but my mind was still. That kind of stillness you feel when you finally stop lying to yourself. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made tea. And I started planning. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, watching the steam rise from my cup, thinking about that woman's voice. Confident, possessive, like she'd already won. By morning, the sun had started bleeding through the blinds, pale and cold. Daniel walked into the kitchen, shirt half-buttoned, tie loose, phone already in hand. "Morning," he said, like nothing had happened. I looked up at him and smiled. "You were working late again." "Yeah. Claudia's got this new client." I cut him off softly. "Did she call you last night?" He froze, just for a second. Then he laughed, too quickly. "What? No. Why would she?" But I'd already seen the flicker in his eyes, that small, involuntary panic people have when they're deciding how much truth to tell. I wanted to scream, to throw the cup across the room, to demand why. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded slowly. "Right. Must have been a mistake." He kissed my cheek before leaving, but it felt rehearsed, like muscle memory, not love. When the door closed, I stood there in silence. That's when it hit me. Betrayal doesn't sound like shattering glass. It's quiet. It's the click of a door closing when you realize they're not coming back, not really. For the next few days I lived two lives. In one, I was still the loyal wife, laundry done, dinners cooked, voice calm. In the other, I was quietly collecting fragments of the truth, his calendar notifications, his receipts, his lies. There were dinners that didn't appear on his schedule. Hotel transactions charged to his corporate card. One, specifically, the Bristol, downtown. A place too expensive for business meetings. The final confirmation came one rainy Friday evening. He texted that he'd be home late. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove downtown, parked across from the hotel, and waited. The rain hit the windshield in small, nervous bursts. At 9:42 p.m. I saw him. He was laughing, that easy, relaxed kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months. And next to him, wrapped in a black trench coat, was Claudia Mercer. She wasn't holding his hand. She didn't need to. They looked like two people who had rewritten the rules of the world to fit their desire. I watched them walk into the lobby. No hesitation, no shame. And in that moment, something strange happened. I didn't feel anger, I felt clarity. Because I realized, she didn't just want him, she wanted to own him, the same way she owned that company. Those boardrooms, those headlines about Mercer Designs, the woman behind Chicago's skyline. She was used to taking what wasn't hers. And I was about to become the one mistake she never saw coming. That night, when Daniel came home past midnight, I pretended to be asleep. He smelled faintly of her again, that same sharp, expensive perfume. He slipped into bed beside me. His phone buzzed once. I peeked at the screen. "Claudia, you're mine. Remember that." The next morning, I kissed him goodbye like nothing was wrong. Then I got dressed, packed my laptop, and drove straight to the firm. I wasn't planning to confront her. Not yet. I wanted to see her. To understand the kind of woman who could look into another woman's life and decide it was disposable. When I walked into the office, the receptionist looked startled. "Oh, Mrs. Carter, hi." Daniel didn't mention. "I'm here to see Ms. Mercer," I said calmly. Claudia's office was on the top floor, glass walls, skyline view, orchids on the desk. She was standing by the window, phone in hand, voice low. When she turned around and saw me, her expression didn't change. "Emily, right?" she said. "Daniel's wife." There was no apology, no guilt, just amusement. "Yes," I said. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" she asked, crossing her arms. "For showing me exactly who my husband really is." She smiled faintly, like I was a child who didn't understand how the world worked. Men like Daniel need direction. Stability. I give him that. I let her talk, let her believe she was the powerful one in the room. Then I said quietly, "You're right. He does need direction. And soon, he'll have plenty. Without you." Her smile faltered for the first time. "Excuse me." I just nodded politely and left. Outside, my hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. Because in that 5-minute conversation, I saw her weakness, pride. The kind that blinds people who think they're untouchable. And pride, I knew, was the easiest thing to break. That night, as Daniel showered, I opened his laptop. The company files synced automatically to his cloud, contracts, blueprints, emails, including one from Claudia's private address. The one she used to move client funds into her consulting shell company. I didn't need to look further. I had everything I needed. The betrayal had already burned through my heart. Now it was time to turn that fire outward, slow, precise, and devastating. I learned that the quietest revenge is the one that looks like coincidence. The one that wears a suit, sends calendar invites, and smiles while the other person wonders how everything fell apart so fast. I started small. I made digital copies of everything I'd found, receipts, emails, client invoices, the transaction trail that led from Claudia's private address to a consulting shell with no real business. I printed them too, because paper has a way of feeling real in a way pixels don't. I put the stack in a folder and slid it into the top shelf of the closet I hardly ever opened. Every time I closed the door, my chest unclenched a little. I knew two things: pride was her weakness, and she had enemies. Not many, but enough. People who'd been elbowed aside by her brilliance, clients who'd been upsold into overpriced projects, a former partner who'd quietly resigned last year with a forced smile. I started to listen, at dinners, at neighborhood meetings, even in the bar where Daniel went with colleagues. People always say what they wouldn't in front of you. I made a list. Little snippets. Board member. Thin-skinned about reputation. Former partner. Resigned after budget cuts. Local architecture magazine. Like scandal. My plan would be a slow weave between those threads, not a sledgehammer. First, I needed leverage that couldn't be dismissed as jealousy evidence. Hard, unassailable evidence that would make the firm's lawyers sit up and the board ask questions. So I copied emails from Daniel's work account. Client approvals with Claudia's private signature line. Fund transfers labeled as consulting fees, and a spreadsheet where one line item made the whole thing scream fraud. Design contingency. Transferred to M. Consulting. I didn't leak anything yet. I waited. I watched how she behaved at the holiday party. How she joked about legacy and how to build a brand. I watched how the partners flocked to her like moths. She was untouchable, because everyone believed she was indispensable. That was her armor. My job was to make them realize it was a paper crown glued on with lies. Next, I cultivated patience. I began to plant small doubts in the right places. Casual conversations, carefully worded questions. At a neighborhood fundraiser where Claudia volunteered, I mentioned lightly, "Did you know that some firms outsource their consulting to freelancers who then bill twice? It's wild." People nodded. Seeds fell into the fertile soil of gossip. I also reached out to one person I'd never expected to talk to: Maya Reed, a reporter from the architecture magazine Daniel bought years ago. I'd read Maya's pieces for months. She liked narratives that cut through prestige and asked the questions no one wanted to say aloud. I sent her an anonymous email at first. "You might want to look into Mercer Designs. There are inconsistencies in their client billing." She replied with a single question: proof. That night, I burned through the stack in my closet again and made photocopies. Carefully redacted where needed, but enough to make a case. I didn't sensationalize. I let the documents speak the anger I felt. Then I packaged them and sent them to Maya through a secure drop. I wrote one line in the note: "Follow the money." While the journalist stirred, I turned to the board. I composed a letter, not accusatory, simply factual, dated, and concise. I included timelines and referenced transactions with invoice numbers. I didn't sign it. I mailed it from a public postbox 2 neighborhoods over. A few days later, I saw the first ripple: an internal email to the partners, curt and closed, the kind that means someone nervous is scanning the ledger. Claudia noticed, of course. She called a meeting. A polished, confident performance in the glass conference room. "We're dealing with a rumor," she told the partners with that tight smile. "We will handle it internally." She looked at Daniel like he was a footnote. I watched from the doorway, watching every twitch. She was beginning to feel the air thin. Then I played my last card: public pressure. Maya's piece dropped on a Tuesday morning. Not an accusatory exposé, but a meticulous timeline of client funds. With interviews from a former insider, carefully phrased, no names. It was restrained, clinical, and devastating. The headline was a whisper that cracked glass. "When design becomes a ledger, questions at Mercer Designs." The firm's phones rang off the hook. Clients asked for clarifications. The board convened an emergency audit. Claudia's PR team drafted statements that read like obituaries for credibility. I watched her on the news, immaculate, composed, saying rehearsed things about transparency while reporters circled like predators. Daniel tried to call me. He left a string of messages that went from panic to pleading. Please. This isn't what it looks like. I can fix this. I listened to him from the kitchen, the sound of his voice echoing against my bones. I didn't answer. My revenge wasn't about humiliation alone, it was about truth and consequence. If she had built her legacy on lies, then the truth would have to take it down. The board froze her accounts pending the audit. The partners who once lauded her competence started whispering in the stairwells. She sent Daniel a message. You brought this on yourself. And for the first time since this began, Claudia looked uncertain. She checked her phone like someone waiting for a verdict. I closed my laptop, made more tea and sat by the window while the city carried on. Outside, the rain had started again, slow and steady, washing the skyline into a watercolor smear. I thought of the way she used to own rooms. I thought of the way Dan's laugh used to bloom in our kitchen. I thought of the quiet method that had become my instrument. Revenge, I discovered, isn't loud. It's inevitable. The morning the story broke wide open, the world seemed still. News anchors were saying her name now. Claudia Mercer. With that measured tone people use when a powerful person starts to fall. Her photo filled the screen, crisp blazer, diamond earrings, the embodiment of control. Except this time the caption beneath it read, Mercer Designs under investigation for financial misconduct. I sat on the couch, mug in hand, the steam curling up in slow ribbons. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt quiet, almost sacred. Like the end of a storm. Daniel came home that afternoon. His tie was gone, his face pale, eyes red like he hadn't slept. He stood in the doorway for a long time before saying anything. He whispered. You did this. Didn't you? I looked at him. What makes you think that? He ran a hand through his hair. They're tearing the firm apart. Claudia's been suspended. The audit's uncovering everything. The partners think I leaked it. I took a slow sip of my tea. Maybe that's what happens when you build your life around someone else's lies. He sat down, staring at his hands. I made a mistake. She made me feel like I mattered. Like I was part of something bigger. I cut in softly. So you traded love for validation. I hope it was worth it. He looked up at me then, eyes wide and desperate. You don't understand what she was like. She could destroy anyone. She already did, I said. Including herself. For the first time in months, I saw him as he truly was, small, frightened and hollow. A man who had mistaken admiration for power, lust for purpose. He tried to touch my hand. I pulled it back. Emily, he said, voice breaking, can we start over? I shook my head slowly. No, Daniel. You can rebuild your career, your image, whatever's left. But I can't rebuild trust from ashes. He left that night. The door closed behind him with the same soft click I'd heard months before, only this time, it didn't hurt. A week later, the firm announced Claudia's resignation, for personal reasons. Her portrait, the one that hung in the lobby, was quietly taken down. I drove by one afternoon and saw it leaning against the wall in the hallway, face turned inward, like she couldn't bear to watch herself fall. The magazine released a follow-up article a month later. The board had confirmed serious discrepancies in the company's financials. No charges were public yet, but her reputation was done. Her legacy, the empire she built from ambition and arrogance, was dust in a matter of weeks. And me, I didn't need to gloat. I didn't post cryptic quotes online or tell mutual friends what had happened. I just lived. I went back to my old routines, morning coffee, walks by the river, a good book before bed. But this time, I moved through life with a kind of quiet freedom I'd never known before. One afternoon, months later, I found a handwritten note in my mailbox, no return address. Just my name, inside a single line, you destroyed everything I built. I hope you're proud. No signature, but I didn't need one. I stared at it for a moment, then smiled faintly. I folded the note once, placed it in my drawer, and whispered to the empty room, no, Claudia. You destroyed it yourself. I just held up the mirror. Sometimes revenge isn't about payback, it's about restoration, giving the truth a place to breathe after being buried under someone else's lies. A few months later I saw her again. Not in person. On TV. A small interview clip. She looked older, exhausted, her confidence stripped bare. She was talking about rebuilding and resilience. The interviewer asked if she had regrets. Claudia paused, eyes flickering just slightly, and said, only that I trusted the wrong people. I turned off the TV. Because even in the end, she couldn't admit what really destroyed her. Herself. That night, I went out to the balcony. The city lights blinked below like small, forgiving stars. I realized then that revenge isn't just a story of endings. It's also about clarity, the kind that comes when you stop asking why they did it and start asking why you let them. The rain started again, soft, familiar. I stood there, letting it touch my face, washing away the last pieces of a woman who once waited up all night for a man who never really came home. And as the wind brushed past, carrying the scent of wet earth and distance, I whispered to the dark, "I'm finally free."